I took the night shift because it paid more and because I needed the money. Simple as that. I'd been working as a janitor at the Civic Center for about 3 months, cleaning offices, restrooms, hallways, all the stuff people don't think about until it's not done. The building closed to the public at 6, and my shift started at 10. By the time I clocked in, the place was a ghost town. Most nights it was fine. I'd put in my earbuds, listen to podcasts, and work my way through the checklist. But that night, something felt off from the start. I was in the main lobby restroom, the big one near the auditorium, checking the digital cleaning log on my tablet. We had to mark every task as we completed it: sinks, mirrors, floors, stalls. The system would auto-update throughout the day based on sensor data, flagging areas that needed attention. I scrolled through the list. Sinks? Clear. Mirrors? Clear. Floors? Clear. Then I got to the stalls. Stall 1? Clear. Stall 2? Clear. Stall 3? Clear. Stall 4? Occupied. I frowned. That didn't make sense. The building had been closed for hours. I was the only person here aside from the security guard at the front desk, and he never left his post. I looked up at the row of stalls. All the doors were open except for stall 4, but I could see underneath. No feet, no shadow. It was empty. I walked over and knocked on the door. Hello? Anyone in there? Nothing. I pushed the door. It swung open easily, unlocked. The stall was empty. Toilet, walls, nothing else. I checked the motion sensor above the door, one of those small white boxes that tracked occupancy for the cleaning system. The little red light was on, indicating it had detected movement, but there was no one inside. I backed out, went to my tablet, and manually marked stall 4 as clear. Then I finished cleaning the rest of the bathroom and moved on to the next one. An hour later, I came back to check my progress on the tablet. I was ahead of schedule, which was good. I scrolled through the completed tasks, making sure everything was logged correctly. Then I saw it. Stall 4. Occupied. My stomach tightened. I'd just cleared it. I'd marked it myself. But the system had updated again, and now it was showing as occupied. I looked up at the restroom. I was standing about 20 feet away, near the lobby entrance. From where I stood, I could see the row of stalls. Stall 4's door was closed. I hadn't closed it. I'd left it open. I always left the doors open after cleaning so people could see they were available. But now it was shut, the little indicator on the outside showing red. Occupied. I walked over slowly, my footsteps echoing on the tile. The motion sensor light above the stall flickered on as I approached, then off, then on again. "Hello?" I called out, my voice shaky. No response. I crouched down and looked under the door. No feet, no one there. But the motion sensor kept flickering, on, off, like something inside was moving, triggering it over and over. I stood up and reached for the door handle. My hand was trembling. I took a breath, pushed the door open, and cold air hit me like a wall. Not just cool, freezing, a violent gust of icy wind that rushed out of the stall and slammed into my chest, so cold it burned. I stumbled backward, gasping, my breath coming out in visible puffs. The stall was empty, but the air inside was arctic, swirling like a vortex, stirring up bits of dust and paper from the floor. The motion sensor above the door was going haywire now, flashing rapidly, the red light strobing in the dim bathroom. I backed away, my heart pounding, and grabbed my radio. "Tom, you there?" Static, then a crackle. "Yeah, I'm here. What's up?" "Can you come to the lobby restroom? Something's wrong." "Wrong how?" "Just come here, please." He grumbled something I couldn't make out, but a few minutes later he showed up, his security uniform wrinkled, coffee cup in hand. "What's the problem?" he asked, looking around. I pointed at stall 4. The door was still open, swaying slightly. The cold air had dissipated, but I could still feel the lingering chill. "That stall," I said. "It keeps showing as occupied on the system, and when I opened it, there was this freezing air, like something was in there." Tom stared at me for a long moment. Then he sighed and pulled out his phone, scrolling through something. "Stall 4, you said." "Yeah." He didn't say anything for a while, just kept reading. Then he looked up at me, his expression unreadable. "Come with me," he said. He led me down the hall to the administrative offices and unlocked one of the supervisor's doors. Inside, he pulled up something on the computer, a maintenance database. "Look," he said, pointing to the screen. It was a service record for the lobby restroom, dated 3 years ago. The entry read, "Stall 4 removed from service, motion sensor disconnected, door to be kept locked." "What?" I said, leaning closer. "But it's not locked. It's not even marked out of order." "I know," Tom said quietly, "but according to this, it's supposed to be." He clicked through a few more files, pulling up the cleaning log history. I watched as he filtered it by location: lobby restroom, stall 4. Hundreds of entries, going back years. Every single night. Stall 4. Occupied. "What the hell?" I whispered. Tom scrolled further back to the date when the stall was first flagged for removal. There was a note attached, an incident report. "Fatal overdose, stall 4. Body discovered by janitorial staff during night shift. Pronounced dead at scene. Area to be sanitized and sealed pending investigation." My mouth went dry. Someone died in there. Tom nodded. 3 years ago. They tried to keep it quiet, didn't want bad press. But after that, weird stuff started happening. The motion sensor would trigger even when no one was there. The door would lock and unlock itself, and the system kept marking it as occupied every night, no matter what we did. So why didn't they just remove the stall, or at least lock it? They tried, multiple times, but every time someone came to work on it, something would go wrong. Tools would go missing, workers would get sick. One guy said he felt like he was being watched the whole time, and he refused to come back. I stared at the screen, at the endless log of entries. Occupied. 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 "What am I supposed to do?" I asked. Tom closed the window and looked at me. "Same thing the rest of us do. Mark it as clear on your log. Finish your shift and don't think about it too hard." But I couldn't not think about it. For the rest of the night, every time I walked past that restroom, I could feel it. The weight of something watching, waiting. I checked the tablet one more time before I clocked out. Stall 4. Occupied. I quit 2 weeks later. Couldn't take it anymore. The building, the restroom, that stall, it all felt wrong, like something was still there, trapped, refusing to leave. And maybe it is, because according to the log, stall 4 is still occupied. Every single night. I was driving home from a concert, still buzzing from the music, when I had to stop for gas. It was past midnight, and I'd been on the road for over an hour. The gas station was one of those lonely ones off a back highway. Single building, flickering sign, dark fields stretching out in every direction. I filled up the tank and went inside to pay. The clerk was half asleep behind bulletproof glass, barely looking at me as I handed over my card. On my way out, I realized I needed to use the restroom. There was one around the side of the building, single occupancy, the kind with a heavy door and a lock that you could turn from the inside. I unlocked it with the key attached to a wooden block the clerk had shoved through the window slot, pushed the door open, and stepped inside. It was small, just a toilet, a sink, a paper towel dispenser, and a mirror above the sink. The walls were painted institutional beige, and the fluorescent light overhead buzzed quietly. It smelled like bleach and something else, something stale. I locked the door behind me, went to the sink, and turned on the water. Cold water streamed out, and I splashed some on my face, trying to wake myself up for the rest of the drive. I turned the faucet off, dried my hands on a paper towel, and tossed it in the trash. That's when I heard it. Water running. I turned around. The faucet had turned on again. Water pouring into the sink, splashing onto the counter. "Okay," I said aloud, my voice shaky. "This isn't funny." The faucet turned off. The toilet flushed. The light switched off, on, off, on. Each action happened in rapid succession, like someone was going through a checklist, copying everything I'd done, but faster now, overlapping. I yanked the door open and stumbled out into the night air, gasping. The door swung shut behind me with a heavy thud, and I stood there under the flickering gas station sign, my hands shaking. I looked back at the bathroom. Through the small window near the top of the door, I could see the light inside. It was on, steady, normal. I started walking toward my car, my legs weak, but something made me stop. I turned back and looked at the window again, and that's when I saw it. My reflection. In the mirror. Inside. I could see it through the window, just barely. The angle was wrong. I shouldn't have been able to see the mirror from where I was standing, but I could. And my reflection was still in there, standing at the sink, staring straight ahead, not moving. I felt cold all over. I took a step to the left. My reflection didn't move. It just stood there, perfectly still, hands at its sides, staring at the mirror. Then its mouth started moving, slowly, deliberately, like it was saying something, but there was no sound, just the silent movement of lips, forming words I couldn't hear. I backed away, my eyes locked on the window. My reflection kept mouthing words over and over, the same pattern. Then it stopped and smiled. Not my smile, something else, something wrong. The bathroom door slammed shut, hard. The sound echoed across the empty lot like a gunshot. I ran, got in my car, started the engine, and didn't stop driving until I was 20 miles down the road. I pulled over at a rest stop, my hands still trembling, and tried to calm down, tried to convince myself it was just a weird glitch, bad wiring, old plumbing, something logical. But I couldn't shake the image of that reflection, the way it had stayed behind, the way it had smiled. A few days later, I looked up the gas station online, found a local news article about 5 years ago. A man had died in that bathroom, got trapped inside during a power outage. The door's electronic lock had malfunctioned, sealing him in. By the time someone found him the next morning, he'd already been dead for hours. Heart attack, they said, panic-induced. After that, the gas station rebuilt the bathroom. New walls, new fixtures, new everything. But they kept the same layout, same size, same single-occupancy design. The article mentioned complaints, people saying the bathroom felt off, that things would happen inside, lights flickering, water turning on by itself. The gas station owner dismissed it as old equipment, but I know what I saw. I know that reflection wasn't mine, and I know that whatever's trapped in that bathroom is still there, still repeating, still copying, trying to remember what it's like to be alive. I don't drive that route anymore. I take the long way, and I don't use single-occupancy restrooms if I can help it, because I never want to see my reflection stay behind. I had been at the hospital for hours, waiting while my mom went through some routine tests. Nothing serious, just follow-up stuff, but the waiting room was cramped and stuffy. I needed to stretch my legs, clear my head, so I wandered down the hallway looking for a restroom. I found one near the radiology department, single occupancy, marked as accessible, the kind with grab bars, extra space, and one of those red emergency call buttons mounted on the wall next to the toilet. I'd seen them 100 times before, never thought much about them. I went inside, locked the door, and went about my business. When I finished, I was washing my hands at the sink, watching the soap swirl down the drain, when I heard it. A loud buzzing sound, sharp, insistent. I looked up. The emergency button on the wall was flashing red, and an alarm was blaring from a speaker above the door. My heart jumped. I hadn't touched it. I was standing at the sink, a good 5 feet away, but the button was going off like someone had just pressed it. "Hello?" A voice crackled through the intercom. Female. Professional. This is security. Do you need assistance? I stared at the button, then at the speaker. No, I'm fine. I didn't press that. A pause. Then, are you sure? The system shows an emergency call from your location. I'm sure, I said, drying my hands quickly. I didn't touch it. Must be a malfunction or something. Another pause, longer this time. Then the voice came back. Different now. Quieter. Almost flat. We know. I froze, my hands still clutching the paper towel. What? The button started flashing again. The alarm blared louder, echoing in the small space. We know you didn't press it, the intercom said through the speaker. My stomach dropped. Then who did? No response. Just the alarm, and that flashing red light pulsing over and over. I backed toward the door, my hand reaching for the lock. I twisted it, pulled the handle. It didn't move. I yanked harder. Nothing. The door was locked, but not from the inside, from the outside. Hey! I shouted, pounding on the door. Let me out! The intercom crackled again. Stay where you are. What? No! Let me out! Stay where you are, the voice repeated, calm and emotionless. The alarm stopped. The button stopped flashing. The room went silent, except for my own ragged breathing. I pressed my ear against the door, listening. I could hear footsteps in the hallway, muffled voices. Someone was out there. Please, I called through the door. I need to get out. The door's locked. The footsteps stopped, right outside. Then I heard it, a sound coming from inside the wall, behind the panels next to the toilet. A slow, deliberate scraping, like something dragging across metal, or someone dragging their nails against the inside of the wall. I backed into the corner, my eyes locked on the panel. The scraping got louder, closer, moving along the wall toward the emergency button. Then it stopped. The button flashed once, twice, and pressed itself in. I watched in horror as the red button depressed, like an invisible finger was pushing it. The alarm blared again, and the intercom crackled to life. But this time, there was no voice, just breathing. Slow, raspy, coming through the speaker. I screamed, pounded on the door with both fists. Let me out! Please, someone let me out! The breathing stopped. The door clicked. Unlocked. I yanked it open and stumbled into the hallway, nearly colliding with two security guards running toward me. Are you okay? One of them asked, grabbing my arm to steady me. The door locked, and the button, it pressed itself. Someone was in the wall. They exchanged a glance, the kind of look that said they didn't believe me. Ma'am, we need you to calm down, the other guard said. We got the emergency call. What happened? I told you, the button went off on its own. I didn't press it. And then it pressed again, and I heard something in the wall, and the door locked from the outside. The first guard pulled out his radio. Get maintenance down here. Check the emergency system in radiology restroom C. They led me to a chair nearby and had me wait while a maintenance guy showed up with a tablet and some tools. I watched him go into the bathroom, check the button, and pull up something on his screen. When he came back out, his face was pale. What is it? One of the guards asked. The maintenance guy hesitated. The log shows 2 emergency activations in the last 10 minutes, both from this bathroom. So it's malfunctioning? The guard said. Not exactly. He turned the tablet around. Look at the source location. I leaned forward to see. The screen showed a schematic of the bathroom, with 2 red dots indicating where the button presses had been detected. The first one was inside the room, normal. The second was behind the wall, about 3 feet to the left of the actual button, in a space that shouldn't exist. What does that mean? I asked, my voice shaky. The maintenance guy rubbed his face. It means the signal came from inside the wall cavity, but that's impossible. There's nothing back there but pipes and insulation. Could it be crossed wires? The guard asked. Maybe, but he trailed off, looking uncomfortable. But what? I pressed. He glanced at the guards, then back at me. There was an incident during the renovation about 8 years ago, before they installed these new emergency systems. What kind of incident? He lowered his voice. A contractor went missing. They were working on this wing, tearing down old walls, putting in new panels. One day he just didn't show up. They figured he quit. Happens all the time in construction. But a few weeks later, someone complained of a smell coming from one of the walls in this hallway. My blood went cold. You're saying, he said quietly, they found him sealed behind the drywall. Somehow he'd gotten trapped in the wall cavity during construction. Maybe got disoriented, crawled into the wrong space. By the time they realized, it was too late. They pulled down the panels and found him. I felt sick. Which wall? He pointed at the bathroom I'd just been in. They cleaned everything out, rebuilt it, installed the new emergency system, but ever since then, we've had issues. Random activations, alarms going off when no one's in. We usually just reset it and move on. And the breathing? I whispered. The scraping? He didn't answer, just looked at the door. One of the guards cleared his throat. We'll file a report, get someone to do a full inspection. But I could tell from their faces they wouldn't find anything. They never did. I left the hospital that day and didn't come back. When my mom asked why I wouldn't visit her during her next appointment, I made up an excuse. I couldn't tell her the truth, that someone was still trapped in that wall, still trying to call for help, still pressing that button over and over, hoping someone would finally hear them. And now, every time I see one of those red emergency buttons, I wonder if anyone else has heard the breathing, felt the door lock, seen the button press itself. Because I know what I heard, and I know that whoever's behind that wall isn't gone. They're still there, still waiting, still calling for help that will never come.
I was about 40 minutes from home when I had to pull over. It was one of those drives where you're half asleep, half wired on gas station coffee, and your body just decides it's done waiting. The highway was empty, just me, the hum of my engine, and a whole lot of nothing. So when I saw the glow of that old Chevron sign cutting through the dark, I didn't think twice. I pulled in. The place looked like it hadn't been updated since the 90s. Flickering neon, cracked pavement, one of those attached convenience stores with bars on the windows. But I wasn't there to sightsee. I just needed to use the restroom and get back on the road. The door to the men's room was around the side of the building, one of those heavy metal things that creaked when I pushed it open. Inside, it was worse than I expected. Dim fluorescent light buzzing overhead, tiles that might have been white once, and that smell. Stale water and something sour I didn't want to identify. There were 2 stalls. The first one had its door halfway open, and I could see the toilet was busted. No seat, just the bowl. The second stall, at the far end, had its door closed. I didn't think much of it. I went into the first stall, even though it was kind of gross, because I figured I'd be quick. That's when I heard it. Breathing. Slow. Heavy. Coming from the stall next to mine. At first I thought maybe someone was just sitting in there, doing their thing. But the longer I stood there, the weirder it felt. The breathing wasn't normal. It was too steady, too deliberate. In, out. In, out. Like someone was concentrating on it. And there was no other sound. No shuffling, no rustling of clothes, no phone scrolling. Just that breathing. I tried to ignore it, tried to focus on why I was there, but my brain wouldn't let it go. Who just sits in a gas station bathroom stall in the middle of the night and breathes like that? I finished up, zipped my jeans, and stood there for a second, listening. The breathing continued. Same rhythm, same volume. It didn't change at all. I flushed, washed my hands at the sink, which was right between the 2 stalls, and I kept glancing at that closed door in the mirror. Still no movement, no feet visible underneath the gap at the bottom. And that's when it really started to bother me.
I dried my hands on my jeans because the paper towel dispenser was empty, and I walked toward the exit. But I stopped. I don't know why. Maybe I was annoyed, maybe I was creeped out, but something made me turn around and just wait. I stood there by the sinks, staring at that stall door, and I listened. The breathing was still going. In, out. In, out. Mechanical almost, like it wasn't even coming from a person. Then I took a step toward the door, and the breathing stopped. Just like that. Total silence. My heart kicked up in my chest. I froze, staring at the stall. I waited for something, a cough, a shuffle, anything. But there was nothing.
The fluorescent light buzzed above me. Water dripped from one of the faucets behind me. But from that stall, dead quiet. I don't know what possessed me to do it, but I walked up to the door and looked down at the gap underneath. No feet. No shoes. No shadow. Nothing. My skin went cold. I backed up a step. My eyes locked on that door. It didn't make sense. I'd heard someone in there. I know I did. But there was no way anyone could have left. I would have heard the door open, would have seen them walk past me. "Hello?" I said, my voice coming out quieter than I meant it to. Nothing. I cleared my throat and tried again, a little louder. "Hey, you all right in there?" Still nothing. My hand was shaking as I reached out and knocked on the stall door. 3 short taps. The sound echoed in the tiny bathroom, way louder than it should have been. No answer. I stood there, my breath shallow, my mind racing. Every logical part of me said to just leave, get out, go home, forget about it. But I couldn't. I had to know. So I pushed the door. It swung open slowly, the hinges squeaking, and I stepped back, half expecting someone to lunge out at me. But the stall was empty. Completely empty. No one inside. No bag, no jacket, nothing. Just a grimy toilet and graffiti-covered walls. I stared at it, my brain trying to catch up with what I was seeing, or wasn't seeing. The air in the stall felt colder than the rest of the room, and there was this faint smell, something metallic and wrong.
I backed out of the bathroom and practically jogged to the convenience store entrance. The guy behind the counter was older, maybe 60s, leaning on his elbows and watching some late-night talk show on a tiny TV. "Hey," I said, a little out of breath. "The bathroom back there. Someone was in the second stall. But when I checked, no one was there." He looked at me, his expression totally flat. Then he glanced toward the back of the store, toward the restroom, and let out this long, tired sigh. "That stall's been out of order for months," he said, his voice low and matter-of-fact. I blinked. "What?" "Yeah, we keep meaning to lock the door, but..." He trailed off, shaking his head. "Someone died in there. Few months back. Guy had a heart attack, collapsed, and no one found him till the next morning." My stomach dropped. "So you're saying no one should have been in there?" He just looked at me, didn't say anything, didn't have to. I left without another word, got in my car, and sat there for a minute with the engine running, staring at that side door to the restroom. The light above it flickered once, twice, then went out completely. I didn't wait to see if it came back on. I just drove. I only had about 5 minutes before the mall closed, but I really had to go. I'd been there all day helping my sister pick out furniture for her new apartment, and by the time we were done, my bladder was screaming at me.
She headed to the parking lot while I made a quick detour to the restrooms near the food court. The place was practically deserted. Most of the stores had already pulled down their gates, and the overhead lights were dimmed to that eerie after-hours glow. My footsteps echoed as I walked down the tile corridor, and when I pushed open the door to the women's restroom, I was hit with that sharp chemical smell of industrial cleaner. The janitors had already been through. There was a yellow caution sign folded up and leaning against the wall, and the floor was still damp in spots. I glanced under the stalls out of habit. 3 stalls total. The first 2 were empty, doors hanging open, but the third one, at the far end, was closed, locked. I hesitated for a second, then headed into the second stall. As I was in there, I kept listening. It was quiet. Too quiet. No shuffling, no rustle of toilet paper, no flush. Whoever was in that last stall wasn't moving at all. When I finished, I washed my hands and checked my phone. My sister had texted me twice asking where I was. I dried my hands and glanced back at the third stall. Still closed, still silent. "Hey," I called out. "They're about to close them all. You good?" Nothing. I walked closer and knocked on the door. 2 quick taps. And then I heard it. "Just a minute." A woman's voice, soft, polite, almost apologetic. "Okay, no problem," I said, relieved.
I stepped back and leaned against the sink, scrolling through my phone while I waited. But as the seconds ticked by, I started to feel uneasy. A minute passed, then 2. I looked up from my phone and stared at the stall door. Still no sound, no movement. "You okay in there?" I asked, louder this time. Silence. Then, after a long pause, the same voice. "Just a minute." I froze. It was the exact same tone, the exact same inflection, like she'd said it the exact same way, word for word. I felt a chill creep up the back of my neck. "Seriously, are you all right?" I said, my voice a little shaky now. Nothing. I crouched down and looked under the door. No feet, no shadow. The lights inside the stall were off. I could see the darkness through the crack at the bottom. My heart started pounding. I stood up and backed toward the exit, my eyes locked on that door. Something was very, very wrong. I pushed open the restroom door and practically ran to the nearest store that was still open, a phone accessories kiosk. The guy working there looked like he was just about to pack up. "Hey, I need help," I said, breathless. "There's someone in the bathroom who won't come out, and I think something's wrong." He frowned, pulling out his radio. "Which bathroom?" "The one by the food court, third stall." He called it in, and within a couple of minutes, a security guard showed up. Middle-aged guy, looked tired, like this was the last thing he wanted to deal with before clocking out. "All right, let's check it out," he said. I led him back to the restroom. The door was still slightly ajar from when I'd left. He pushed it open and stepped inside, and I followed, staying close behind him. The third stall was still locked. He knocked, firm and loud. "Security, you need to come out, ma'am. Mall's closed." Silence. He knocked again. "If you don't respond, I'm going to have to unlock this door." Still nothing. He pulled out this ring of keys, flipping through them until he found the right one. He slid it into the lock on the stall door and turned it with a heavy click. Then he pushed the door open. The stall was pitch black inside. He reached in and flicked the light switch. The fluorescent bulb overhead buzzed to life, flickering for a second before staying on. The stall was empty. No one inside, no bag, no phone, just a toilet and bare walls. I stared at it, my mouth dry. "That's impossible," I whispered. I heard her. She answered me, twice. The guard looked at me, then back at the stall. His jaw tightened. "What did she say?" he asked. "She said, 'Just a minute,' both times, the exact same way." His face went pale. He stepped back from the stall and let out a slow breath. "Come with me," he said quietly. He led me out of the restroom, down the hall, and into the security office tucked away near the back entrance of the mall. Inside, it was cramped, monitors showing grainy footage from cameras all over the building, a desk covered in paperwork, a coffee maker that looked like it hadn't been cleaned in months. He sat down and started typing on the computer, pulling up some kind of database. I stood there, arms crossed, trying to calm my racing heart. "You're not the first person to report this," he said, not looking up from the screen. "What?" "That stall, that voice." He clicked through a few files, then turned the monitor toward me. "Look." It was an incident report log, dozens of entries, all from the same bathroom, all describing the same thing, a woman's voice responding from the locked stall. "Just a minute." Some reports went back years. "What? What is this?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "We don't know," he said. "Maintenance has checked that stall 100 times. We've had people camp out in there overnight. Nothing. That every few months, someone reports it. Always the same thing. Always that voice." I felt sick. "Has anyone ever seen her?" I asked. He shook his head slowly. "No, never." I left them all that night and didn't look back. My sister asked me why I looked so shaken, but I couldn't bring myself to explain it. Even now, I avoid that mall.
And when I'm in any public restroom and I see a locked stall, I don't knock. I just leave, because I never want to hear that voice again. I should have just held it until I got home.
But it was past midnight. I'd been driving for 3 hours straight, and my bladder wasn't giving me a choice. So when I saw the rest stop sign, I took the exit. The place was nearly deserted. Just a couple of semi-trucks parked in the far corner and one other car near the entrance. The building itself looked like it hadn't been updated since the 80s. Brick facade, those old-style vending machines glowing through the windows, and a fluorescent light above the door that kept flickering on and off. I parked close and headed inside. The lobby was empty. No attendant at the desk, no travelers milling around, just the hum of the vending machines and that buzzing, flickering light that seemed to follow me everywhere in that place. The restroom was down a short hallway to the left. I pushed open the door and immediately felt the temperature drop. It was colder in there, like the heat wasn't working. The lights overhead were flickering too, casting everything in this stuttering, uneven glow. There were 3 sinks along the wall, each with a mirror above it, and 2 stalls to the right, both empty, doors hanging open. I went to the sink in the middle and turned on the water. It sputtered for a second before coming out in a weak, cold stream. I splashed some on my face, trying to wake myself up for the rest of the drive, and that's when I looked up into the mirror. At first, I didn't notice anything wrong, just me. Tired eyes, messy hair, the usual.
But then I moved my hand to turn off the faucet, and I saw it. My reflection moved a half second too late. I froze, staring at myself in the mirror. I lifted my hand slowly, watching. My reflection did the same, but it was off. Just barely. Like there was a delay, a lag, between what I was doing and what I was seeing. I told myself it was the flickering lights. Maybe my eyes were playing tricks on me. I was exhausted. That had to be it. But then I saw her, standing behind me in the mirror. A woman, pale, long dark hair hanging in front of her face. She was just there, completely still, staring at the back of my head. My heart stopped. I spun around. Nothing. No one. The bathroom was empty. I turned back to the mirror, my breath coming faster now. She was still there, still standing behind me, hadn't moved an inch. What the hell? I whispered. I waved my hand in the air behind me, watching the mirror. My hand passed through the space where she should have been, but in the reflection, she didn't react, didn't flinch, just stood there, staring. The lights flickered again, longer this time, and when they came back on, she was closer. I could see her face now, sunken eyes, skin like paper, lips slightly parted, like she was about to say something. I backed up toward the door, my eyes locked on the mirror. I didn't want to turn around. I didn't want to look away, because somehow, I knew, if I did, something worse would happen.
She took another step forward in the reflection. Now she was right behind me, so close I should have been able to feel her breath on my neck. But there was nothing, just cold air and the sound of my own ragged breathing. I raised my hand slowly, trembling. In the mirror, I watched myself do it. But then, her hand raised too. Not mine, hers. I wasn't moving my hand anymore. I'd stopped. But in the mirror, her arm lifted, fingers outstretched, reaching toward the back of my head. My reflection stood frozen, staring forward, while she moved independently behind it. I couldn't breathe, couldn't move. I just stood there, watching in horror as her hand inched closer and closer to my reflection's head. And then, crack! The mirror split, a jagged line right down the center, spiderwebbing out in every direction. I stumbled backward, my heart slamming against my ribs, and the reflection shattered into a dozen fractured pieces. For just a second, in those broken shards, I saw her face repeated over and over, staring at me from every angle. Then, the lights went out completely. I didn't wait. I ran, slammed through the bathroom door, sprinted down the hallway, and burst out into the parking lot. I got in my car, locked the doors, and sat there shaking, staring at the entrance to that rest stop. The lights inside were back on. Everything looked normal, like nothing had happened. I sat there for a good 5 minutes, trying to convince myself I'd imagined it, that I was just tired.
That my mind had played a trick on me. But I knew what I saw. Eventually, I started the car and pulled back onto the highway. I didn't stop again until I was home. A few weeks later, I couldn't get it out of my head. I had to know. So I looked up that rest stop online, tried to find any information about it. And buried in some local news archive, I found an article from about 10 years ago. A woman had died in that bathroom. Suicide. She'd locked herself in one of the stalls and slit her wrists. But according to the article, her body had been found slumped against the wall near the sinks, right in front of the mirror. The rest stop had been briefly closed for cleaning and repairs. They'd replaced the mirror, repainted the walls, tried to move on. But then I found something else, a forum post from 2 years ago. Someone describing the exact same thing I'd experienced. A figure in the mirror, a reflection that didn't match, a crack. And another post from 6 months ago. Same story. I don't go to rest stops anymore. I don't care how long the drive is, I'll hold it. Because I never want to see that mirror again. And I never want to know what would have happened if her hand had actually touched me. I was passing through some tiny town in the middle of nowhere when I needed to stop for food. The kind of place where there's one gas station, one diner, and a whole lot of empty road in between.
The diner looked like it hadn't changed since the 70s. Faded red booths, a jukebox in the corner that probably didn't work, and a waitress who looked at me like I was interrupting her day. I ordered a burger and coffee, ate quickly, and then realized I needed to use the restroom before getting back on the road. The waitress pointed to a narrow hallway at the back of the diner, past the kitchen. "Single bathroom," she said flatly. "Door sticks sometimes." I nodded and headed back. The hallway was dim, just one weak bulb overhead, and the bathroom door was old, heavy wood, painted over so many times you could see the layers peeling at the edges. There was a little metal sign that said restroom and a simple twist lock on the inside handle. I pushed the door open, stepped inside, and locked it behind me. The bathroom was tiny, just a toilet, a sink, and a mirror that was spotted with age. The walls were that weird mint green color you only see in old buildings, and the floor tiles were cracked in places. But it was clean enough, so I didn't think much of it. I was washing my hands when I heard footsteps in the hallway. Slow, deliberate. Someone walking toward the door. I figured it was just another customer waiting their turn. I dried my hands on a paper towel and reached for the door handle. It wouldn't turn. I tried again, twisting harder. Nothing. The lock was still in the unlocked position, but the handle wouldn't budge.
Like something was holding it from the other side. "Hey," I called out. "I'm almost done. Just give me a second." The footsteps stopped, right outside the door. I waited, my hand still on the handle. Silence. "Hello?" I said, louder this time. Nothing. Then the footsteps started again, but they weren't walking away. They were circling, slowly, deliberately, from one side of the door to the other, like someone was pacing back and forth right outside. My stomach tightened. I pulled on the handle again, harder this time, throwing my weight into it. It didn't move an inch. "Hey!" I shouted, pounding on the door. "Let me out!" No response. Just those footsteps. Back and forth. Back and forth. The overhead light flickered. Once. Twice. Then it went out completely, plunging me into darkness. I froze, my heart hammering in my chest. I could still hear the footsteps, clearer now in the dark. The scrape of shoes on linoleum, the faint creak of the floorboards. Then I heard it. The doorknob. Someone was jiggling it from the outside, slowly, testing it, like they were trying to get in. "Who's out there?" I yelled, my voice cracking. "What do you want?" The jiggling stopped. The footsteps stopped. Everything went silent. I stood there in the pitch black, my breath shallow, my hand still gripping the handle. I didn't dare let go. The air felt heavy, oppressive, like the walls were closing in. Then the light flickered back on, weak and buzzing, but on.
I immediately looked down at the gap under the door.
No shadow, no feet, nothing. I yanked on the handle again, panic rising in my throat. Still locked, still stuck. "Let me out!" I screamed, slamming my fists against the door. "Somebody help me!" Nothing. No response. No footsteps. No sound at all. I backed up, pressed myself against the sink, and stared at that door. My mind was racing. Who was out there? Why weren't they saying anything? Why wouldn't they let me out? I was about to kick the door when I heard it. Click. The lock released. I didn't wait. I grabbed the handle, yanked the door open, and stumbled out into the hallway. It was empty. Completely empty. No one there. I looked both ways, my chest heaving, my hand shaking. Nothing. No one. I ran back into the diner. The waitress was behind the counter, wiping down the coffee machine. A couple of truckers were sitting in a booth near the window. Everything looked normal, like nothing had happened. "Hey," I said, breathless. "Who was just back there? Who was outside the bathroom?" She looked at me, confused. "What do you mean?" "Someone locked me in. They were standing right outside the door. They wouldn't let me out." She frowned. "Honey, that lock only works from the inside. There's no way to lock it from out here." "I'm telling you, someone was out there. I heard them. They were walking around, jiggling the handle." She glanced at the truckers, then back at me. "There's been no one back there."
"Just you." "That's impossible," I said, my voice rising. "I heard footsteps. Someone locked me in." One of the truckers looked over. "Lady, we've been sitting here the whole time. Ain't nobody gone back there but you." I felt cold all over. "Check the cameras then. You have to have cameras." The waitress sighed and pulled out a small monitor from under the counter. She rewound the footage, and I watched the grainy black and white feed. There I was, walking down the hallway, going into the bathroom, the door closing behind me. Then, nothing. Just an empty hallway for the entire time I was in there. No one walking past, no one standing outside the door. "See?" she said. "No one." I stared at the screen, my throat dry. "That doesn't make sense." She just shrugged. "Door sticks sometimes, I told you." But it wasn't stuck. Someone was holding it. I know what I heard. I left money on the counter and got out of there as fast as I could. I didn't look back, didn't stop driving until I was 2 towns over. I still don't know what happened in that bathroom, who was outside that door, why they wouldn't speak, why no one else heard them. But I know one thing. I'll never use a single occupancy bathroom again. Not in some small town diner. Not anywhere. Because whatever was on the other side of that door wasn't trying to get in. It was making sure I couldn't get out. I had about 20 minutes before my bus left, so I figured I'd use the restroom at the terminal instead of waiting until I got home. It was early afternoon, that weird dead zone where most people were either at work or hadn't started their commute yet. The terminal was quiet, just a handful of people scattered around, most of them staring at their phones or dozing in the plastic chairs. The restroom was down a long corridor past the ticket counters. I pushed open the door and stepped inside. It was one of those old institutional bathrooms, pale yellow tiles, harsh fluorescent lighting, metal stall dividers that had been painted over so many times the edges were thick with layers of chipped paint. There were 6 stalls total, all of them empty, doors hanging open, except for the last one, which was closed but dark underneath, probably out of order. I picked the 3rd stall from the end, went inside, and locked the door. The whole place smelled like bleach and old water, and I could hear the faint drip of a leaky faucet somewhere. I was just settling in when I heard it. A scraping sound. Soft. Coming from the far end of the room. I froze, listening. It came again. A slow, dragging noise, like fabric against tile. Then I saw them. Fingers. Sliding slowly under the divider of the first stall. Pale, thin fingers, sprayed out flat against the floor. They moved deliberately, almost carefully, like they were feeling their way forward. My breath caught in my throat.
I stared, unable to look away, as the fingers slid all the way under the divider and into the second stall. Then they disappeared. A few seconds later, they appeared again, under the next divider,
moving into the third stall. Closer. I pulled my feet up off the floor instinctively, pressing my back against the wall. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. The fingers kept moving, slow, methodical, sliding from one stall to the next, like someone was crawling on their stomach, searching. They reached the stall next to mine. I could see them clearly now through the gap at the bottom of the divider. Long, bony fingers, nails trimmed short. No rings, no jewelry, just pale skin stretched tight over knuckles. They stayed there for a moment, completely still. Then they started moving again, toward me. I clamped a hand over my mouth to keep from making a sound. The fingers slid under my stall divider, inch by inch, until they were fully inside. Then they stopped, right in front of where my feet had been. I didn't move, didn't breathe. I just watched, frozen, as those fingers sat there on the grimy tile floor. Then they tapped. Twice. Tap. Tap. Deliberate. Purposeful. Like someone knocking on a door. That's when I lost it. I jumped up onto the toilet seat, balancing on the rim, my hands braced against the walls. I looked down at the floor, expecting to see a hand, an arm, a body, something. Nothing. The fingers were gone. Just empty floor. Wet tile.
A couple of old footprints near the drain, but no one there. I stayed frozen on that toilet seat, my legs shaking, my heart racing. I waited, listened. Nothing. No sound. No movement. Just the hum of the ventilation system and that steady drip from the sink. After what felt like forever, I carefully climbed down, unlocked the stall door, and pushed it open. The bathroom was completely empty. Every stall door hung open. No one inside, no one at the sinks, no one by the door. I checked under every stall just to be sure. Nothing. No wet footprints leading out. No sign that anyone had been there at all. I practically ran out of that bathroom, my hands still trembling. I went straight to the information desk near the entrance. An older guy in a transit uniform was sitting there, half asleep, a cup of coffee going cold in front of him. "Excuse me," I said, my voice shaky. "The restroom down that hall, does anyone else work down there? Maintenance or something?" He blinked at me, confused. "Maintenance? No, they don't come in till evening. Why?" Someone was in there, crawling under the stalls. His expression shifted, not confused anymore. Something else, something darker. "Which bathroom?" he asked quietly. "The one past the ticket counters, the big one." He let out a long breath and leaned back in his chair, rubbing his face. "You see anything else? Hear anything?" "Just fingers, under the stalls."
They were moving from one to the next, and then I stopped, realizing how insane it sounded. They tapped on the floor, right where I was. He didn't laugh, didn't dismiss me. He just nodded slowly, like he'd heard this before. "That bathroom's been a problem for a while," he said, his voice low. "We keep meaning to shut it down, but the city won't approve the budget." "What do you mean, a problem?" He hesitated, glancing around to make sure no one else was listening. "About 8 years ago, a maintenance worker went missing. He was doing some pipe work in that restroom, something with the drains. They found him 3 days later. He'd crawled into the crawl space under the floor, trying to fix a blockage, and got stuck. By the time they pulled him out, he was already gone." My stomach dropped. Under the floor? Yeah, there's a whole network of old pipes and access tunnels down there. Most of them are sealed off now. After what happened, they filled in the entrances, locked up the hatches. But he trailed off, shaking his head. People still report seeing things, hearing things, fingers under the stalls, scratching sounds, tapping. I felt sick. "You're saying that was him?" "I'm saying I don't know what it is, but you're not the first person to tell me that story." I left the terminal without using the restroom again. I held it the entire bus ride home, my legs crossed, my mind racing. I kept seeing those fingers, the way they moved, the way they tapped.
I've taken the bus dozens of times since then, but I've never gone back into that bathroom. I don't care how long the wait is. I don't care how badly I have to go, because I know what I saw. And I know those fingers weren't looking for a way out. They were looking for someone to pull down with them. I had a 6 a.m. flight, which meant I was at the airport by 4 in the morning. The place was practically deserted. Just a few red-eye travelers shuffling through security and a couple of cleaning crews pushing their carts down the empty terminals. I grabbed a coffee from one of the only open kiosks and made my way toward my gate. That's when I realized I needed to use the restroom. I was passing through Terminal B, one of the older sections of the airport that always felt a little too quiet, a little too dim. The bathroom was tucked away near a closed-off wing, and when I pushed the door open, I was hit with that sterile smell of soap and recycled air. The place was empty. No one at the sinks, no feet visible under the stalls. Just me and the hum of the ventilation system. I went into the second stall, set my bag on the hook, and that's when I heard it. The PA system crackled to life. "Rachel Brennan, please return to the main terminal immediately." I froze, my hand still on the stall lock. That was my name, my full name. I stood there, confused, trying to figure out why they'd be paging me. I hadn't checked in yet. I hadn't even made it to my gate.
Maybe there was an issue with my ticket, but how would they know I was even here? I was about to leave the stall when the announcement came again. "Rachel Brennan, please return to the main terminal immediately." Same voice, same flat, automated tone. But something about it felt off. It was too loud, like the speaker was right above me instead of out in the terminal. I opened the stall door and stepped out, looking around. The bathroom was still empty. I walked over to the sinks, glancing up at the ceiling. There was a speaker in the corner, one of those old intercom boxes with a metal grate, but it looked like it hadn't been used in years. Dust caked around the edges. I dried my hands quickly, grabbed my bag, and headed for the door. I needed to get to the main terminal, figure out what was going on. But before I could leave, the PA crackled again. "Rachel Brennan." I stopped, my hand on the door handle. The voice was different this time. Still robotic, still mechanical, but slower, drawn out, like someone had slowed down the playback. "Rachel Brennan, please return immediately." My skin went cold. I turned and stared at the speaker in the corner. The voice was coming from inside the bathroom, not from the terminal, not from the main PA costume, from right here. "Rachel Brennan." It was closer now, louder, like the speaker had moved, like it was right behind me. I spun around. Nothing, just sinks and stalls, and that horrible flickering fluorescent light overhead. "Please return immediately." I backed toward the door, my heart pounding in my chest. The voice kept repeating over and over, layering on top of itself. "Rachel Brennan, Rachel Brennan, Rachel Brennan." Then the lights went out. I couldn't see anything, just total darkness. I fumbled for the door handle, my hands shaking, my breath coming in short, panicked gasps. I found it, yanked it open, and stumbled out into the hallway. The lights were still on out there, bright and normal. I turned back toward the bathroom, and the lights inside flickered once, twice, then came back on. Silence. No more announcements. No more voice. I stood there, my chest heaving, staring at that open door. Then I ran. I didn't stop until I reached the main terminal, weaving through the empty chairs and closed shops until I found a customer service desk. A woman in an airport uniform was sitting there, scrolling through her phone. She looked up when I approached, startled. "Are you okay?" she asked, clearly noticing how out of breath I was. "The PA system," I said, my voice shaky. "It was calling my name in the bathroom in Terminal B." She frowned. "Calling your name?" "Yes, my full name, Rachel Brennan. It kept repeating it, telling me to return to the main terminal." She looked confused. "We don't page passengers by name unless it's an emergency, and we definitely don't use the PA system in the bathrooms. Those speakers haven't worked in years." "I heard it," I insisted.
Multiple times. It was coming from inside the bathroom. She tapped something on her computer, pulling up what looked like a log system. After a moment, she shook her head. According to this, the PA system has been offline since midnight. Maintenance shut it down for repairs. It's not supposed to come back on until 6. I felt my stomach drop. That's impossible. I heard it, clear as day. She looked at me for a long moment, then picked up her radio. Let me call security. They can check the footage. 2 security guards showed up about 10 minutes later. They took me back to a small office behind the check-in counters and pulled up the camera feed. One of them typed in the time and location, and we all watched the grainy black and white footage. There I was, walking into the bathroom. The timestamp read 4:14 a.m. I stayed inside for about 2 minutes. Then I came running out, looking panicked, and took off down the hallway. Can you rewind it? I asked. Check if anyone else went in before me. He scrolled back. No one. The bathroom had been empty for over an hour before I got there. What about the PA system? I asked. Can you check the logs? The other guard pulled up something on a tablet. PA's been offline since 12:03 a.m. No announcements made, no manual overrides. Systems completely shut down. I stared at the screen, my hands clenched into fists. Then how did I hear it? They didn't have an answer.
One of them suggested I might have been tired, that maybe I imagined it. The other just looked uncomfortable, like he didn't want to say what he was really thinking. I left the office and went straight to my gate. I didn't use another airport bathroom the entire trip. I didn't even drink water because I didn't want to have to go. When I got home, I looked up that terminal, Terminal B. Turns out it used to be part of the old airport before they expanded. There'd been an incident there years ago. A woman had collapsed in one of the bathrooms and wasn't found for hours. By the time someone checked, she was already gone. Heart attack, they said. Her name was never released to the public. But I can't stop thinking about it, about that voice, the way it said my name over and over. Because whoever, or whatever, was using that PA system knew exactly who I was, and it wanted me to come back. I was halfway through my morning run when I had to stop. It was one of those perfect spring days, not too hot, barely any breeze, just the kind of weather that makes you want to stay outside all day. I'd been doing laps around the park for about 40 minutes when my stomach cramped up. Bad Chinese food from the night before finally catching up with me. There was a public restroom near the east entrance, one of those small brick buildings that the city maintains. I'd used it a few times before. It wasn't fancy, but it was usually clean enough.
I jogged over, pushed open the heavy door, and stepped inside. The bathroom was empty. 3 stalls on the left, 2 sinks on the right, and a small window up high that let in a shaft of dusty sunlight. The air was still and quiet. No wind, no sounds from outside. Just me and the echo of my footsteps on the tile. I went into the middle stall and locked the door behind me. The lock was one of those simple metal sliding bolts, and I watched it click firmly into place. I could see the little indicator on the outside turn from green to red through the crack in the door. I was sitting there, trying to take care of business as quickly as possible, when the door moved. Just an inch, slowly, like someone had given it the gentlest push. I stared at it. The lock was still engaged. I could see it, solid and in place, but the door had definitely moved. I reached out and pushed it closed again, listening to it click back against the frame. A few seconds passed. Then it happened again. The door drifted open, slowly, silently. An inch, then 2, then 3. "Hey," I called out, annoyed now. "The stall's occupied." No response. The bathroom was completely silent, but the door kept moving, opening wider, the gap growing even though the lock was still turned. I stood up, yanked my cans up, and slammed the door shut with my hand. I checked the lock again, still engaged, still turned, the little red indicator still showing. But when I let go of the door, it started opening again.
Inch by inch, like something was pulling it from the other side. My heart started beating faster. I put my hand against the door, holding it closed, my palm pressed flat against the cold metal. I could feel it, a gentle, persistent pressure, pushing against me. "This isn't funny," I said, louder now. "I'm in here." The pressure increased. Not a lot, just enough that I had to push harder to keep the door from opening. I leaned my weight into it, my shoes squeaking against the tile as I braced myself. Then, all at once, the pressure stopped. The door swung open, fully,
slamming against the stall divider with a loud bang that echoed through the bathroom. I stumbled forward, catching myself on the wall. My breath came in short gasps as I stared out at the empty bathroom. No one there. No one at the sinks. No one by the door. Just that shaft of sunlight coming through the window and the sound of water dripping from a faucet. But then I saw it. A shadow. On the floor, right outside my stall. A person's shadow. Tall, thin, standing perfectly still. I looked up. No one. But the shadow was there, clear as day, stretching across the tile like someone was standing between me and the light. "Who's there?" I said, my voice cracking. The shadow didn't move, didn't speak, just stood there. I didn't think. I just ran. I bolted out of the stall, past the sinks, and shoved the bathroom door open so hard it slammed against the outside wall. I burst into the bright sunlight, my chest heaving, my legs shaking. I turned back and looked at the bathroom. The door was swinging slowly closed. Through the small window, I could see inside. Empty. No shadow, no movement. Just an empty bathroom. I stood there for a long time, my hands on my knees, trying to catch my breath, trying to make sense of what I'd just seen. A couple of joggers passed by, giving me weird looks. I didn't care. I just stared at that building, my heart still racing. When I got home, I couldn't let it go. I looked up the park online, searching for anything about the restrooms. At first, I didn't find much, just standard city maintenance logs and some complaints about cleanliness. But then I found a local news article from about 6 years ago. A body had been found in the east restroom, a homeless man. He'd apparently been sleeping behind one of the stalls. There was a small gap between the back wall and the stall divider where he'd wedged himself. No one had noticed him for days. By the time a park worker found him, it was too late. Heart failure, they said, natural causes. I kept digging, found a community forum where people talked about the park. There were complaints about that bathroom, lots of them. People saying the stall doors wouldn't stay closed, that they'd hear footsteps when no one was there, that they'd see shadows moving when the room was empty. One post, from about a year ago, described exactly what I'd experienced.
The door opening on its own, the shadow on the floor, the feeling of being watched. The post ended with, "I don't go to that park anymore." I haven't been back either. I drive to a different park now, even though it's 20 minutes farther. And whenever I pass by the old one, I make sure not to look at that brick building near the east entrance. Because I know what I saw. I know that door was locked. And I know that shadow wasn't mine. Something was in that stall with me. And whatever it was, it didn't want me to leave. I was driving back from visiting my parents, one of those long, mind-numbing highway stretches where you start questioning if you're even awake anymore. It was getting late, past 10, and I needed to stretch my legs, maybe splash some water on my face to keep alert for the last hour of the drive. The rest stop appeared like a beacon in the darkness, one of those newer ones, all glass and steel, trying to look modern but still managing to feel empty and sterile. I pulled in, parked under one of the bright overhead lights, and headed inside. The building was nearly deserted. A tired-looking woman sat behind the information desk, barely glancing up as I passed. A couple was getting coffee from a vending machine. That was it. The restroom was down a short hallway, and when I pushed open the door, I was alone. It was one of those over-designed bathrooms with motion sensor everything, lights, faucets, soap dispensers. I went to the sink furthest from the door, waved my hand under the sensor, and cold water started pouring out. I cupped my hands, splashed it on my face, and that's when I heard it. Whispering. Faint, coming from somewhere close. I turned off the water and listened. Nothing. Just the hum of the ventilation system and a slight echo in the empty room. I turned the water back on, and there it was again, definitely whispering, soft, muffled, like someone talking from far away. I leaned closer to the sink, frowning. The sound was coming from the drain. At first I thought maybe it was just the pipes, old plumbing making weird noises, but the longer I listened, the more I realized it wasn't random. It was a voice,
Words, actual words. I turned the water off completely and crouched down, putting my ear closer to the drain. Help! My blood went cold. It was a voice, quiet, desperate, coming from deep inside the drain. Hello? I said, my voice barely above a whisper. The voice came again, louder this time, clearer. Help me, please. I jerked back, my heart pounding. This wasn't my imagination. Someone was down there, or at least it sounded like someone was down there. Where are you? I called out, louder now. Down here, please, so cold. I stood up and looked around the bathroom, still empty. No one had come in. The motion sensor lights were still on, triggered by my presence alone.
I turned back to the sink, leaning over it, staring into the dark drain. How did you get down there? Are you okay? The voice changed, became more urgent, more focused. Please, help. It hurts. And then it said my name. David. I stumbled backward, my shoes squeaking on the wet tile. How did it know my name? How could it possibly know my name? David, please. Who are you? I shouted, my voice echoing off the walls. How do you know my name? The water turned on by itself, full blast, freezing cold. I could see the steam, or rather the lack of it, as icy water poured from the faucet. The temperature dropped so fast I could see my breath. David, help me. The voice was right there now, right at the surface of the drain, like someone was pressed against a grate, trying to push through. The water kept running, faster and faster, overflowing the sink, spilling onto the counter, onto the floor. I reached for the sensor, waving my hand frantically to turn it off, but it wouldn't stop. The water just kept coming, flooding the bathroom, soaking my shoes. Then the lights started flickering, on, off, the whole bathroom strobing in and out of darkness. And in the darkness I heard it, not just whispering anymore, screaming, a horrible, guttural scream coming from the drain, echoing up through the pipes, filling the entire room. I ran, slipped on the wet floor, caught myself on the wall, and bolted out of that bathroom.
I didn't stop until I was back at my car, my hand shaking so badly I could barely get the key in the ignition. I sat there, engine running, staring at the building. The lights inside looked normal. No water pouring out from under the door, no screaming, just a quiet, empty rest stop in the middle of nowhere. I almost drove away, almost convinced myself I'd imagined the whole thing. But I couldn't. I had to know. I went back inside and found the woman at the information desk. She looked up, annoyed that I was bothering her. The bathroom, I said, still catching my breath. The sink. There's something wrong with it. She sighed. What kind of wrong? The water wouldn't turn off, and I heard a voice coming from the drain. Her expression changed. Not confused, not dismissive. Something else. Something like recognition. Which sink? She asked quietly. The last one. Furthest from the door. She closed her eyes and let out a long breath. Then she picked up the phone and made a call. I couldn't hear what she was saying, but when she hung up, she looked at me with something that almost resembled pity. Maintenance is on their way, she said. You should probably go. What's going on? I asked. What's down there? She hesitated. There used to be another level. Below this one. Old rest stop from the 70s. They built this new building right on top of it. Sealed off the old one. Instead of tearing it down. It's still there. Just closed. Why?
There was an incident, long time ago, before they closed it. She paused, glancing toward the hallway. They never released the details, just sealed it up and tried to move on. And the drains? Some of them still connect. They were supposed to cap them all, but she trailed off. You're not the first person to report hearing things. My stomach turned. What happened down there? She shook her head. I don't know, and I don't want to. Just go home, and maybe use a different rest stop next time. I left, drove straight home without stopping again. When I got there, I looked up that rest stop online, found some old articles about the construction, about the modernization project, but nothing about the old building, nothing about why it was sealed, just that it was no longer in service. I haven't been back, and I never will, because I know what I heard. I know that voice called my name. And I know that whatever's trapped down there, in that old sealed restroom, is still there, still whispering, still waiting for someone to help.